We should now be recording. I do believe that you all know each other, or certainly are well familiar with each other, but I do want to make sure on our end, we just do our due diligence and just make sure you know who we are, because there are some of you who I actually have not really spent any meaningful time with, which is partly why we were so looking forward to this opportunity to be together today. So just so we're all clear, I am John Mitzmacher. I am the head of the Ottawa Jewish Community School, and I am somehow in my 4th year here as head of school. With me is Stacy Zemlach-Kenter, who is our first ever development professional. You have Lauren Siegel, who is currently the vice president of the Board of Trustees. And you have Layla Ages, who is our current president of the Board of Trustees. In a moment, I'm going to share my screen. Depending on what device you are using to do that, you should be able to continue to see both what I show you on my screen and me, although I will get much smaller on your screen, which I'm sure will be a benefit to everyone. But you should at least be able to still see me in a small box while still being able to see the presentation in a larger box. If you're on an iPad, that might be more tricky, and I don't exactly know how to coach you through that. But my hope is that you'll at least get to see the presentation and hear my voice. And again, we're recording it, so you can come back and enjoy this as many times as you like after the fact. So now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hope that we do that successfully. So you should now be looking at a black and white picture of the school with its name in color, and you can hopefully somewhere on your screen in a tiny box see my face. And since no one has made any moves, I'm going to assume that that is all true. I'm going to carry forward. So as we had said in the email, I just want to remind you what our hopes are for this morning, what our agenda is. And we're really looking to do 3 things together. We want to inform you, because for some of you, you may not have received or know as much about what's been going on over the school over the last few years as we want you to know. So we want to do some information sharing. I'm hopeful that some of what we share with you will serve as some means of inspiration. We want you to feel good about what's going on in the school, and we want you to feel good about all that you yourself did to help ensure that we actually are able to do some of the things that we're now doing. So I hope that you come out feeling good about that. And we want to engage. As I said, this is not to us. We don't want to just show you a PowerPoint and give you information. You are people in our community who collectively have extraordinary experience and wisdom, and we want to take advantage of that a little bit. And we want to make sure we spend some time thinking about some things together, and we're hoping to glean some wisdom from you that might help us in very real ways approach some of the opportunities and the challenges that are facing the school in the future. So to get us started, if you'll indulge me, I just want to encourage you to engage in a little bit of a thought exercise. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'm just going to ask you to sort of reflect for just a minute or two on these questions to sort of get us in the right frame of mind. I want you to think about all of the different organizations that you and your families choose to support. What is it about those institutions that inspire you to support them? What are the kinds of expectations that you have as someone who does give meaningful support? What are the hopes and inspirations that you have for the institutions that you care about? And then if you think back to when it was time to step forward and to support what we have been calling, rightfully so, the Victor campaign. When that
I got to interrupt you there, John.
Oh, please do.
It's not correct to say it's the Victor campaign. It was the Richard-Sachs Stephen Victor campaign. Richard was the chairman of the campaign and was very active.
Duly noted.
So please include Richard's name if you go back to referring to that past campaign.
With humility and pleasure, I will make that correction now and forevermore. And thank you for pointing it out and clarifying it for me. That's helpful. When you think back to that campaign, and you think about the kinds of things that were happening at the time, why did you step forward when called upon to step forward? And what is it that you imagined was going to happen as a result of your support, both in terms of what you had hoped were going to happen for the school and in terms of what you thought your own stewardship as someone who gave so meaningfully was going to look like? We know that there were challenges with the way in which not so much the campaign unfolded, but the sort of the results of what happened with the campaign in the immediate years that it was happening. We know that the school did not necessarily have all of the immediate success that was hoped for and perhaps in some context promised were going to happen at the time when those gifts were given. And we know that there were some questions and concerns about how information was shared, the levels of transparency, so forth and so on. What we really want you to know more than anything else about this for today, if you come away with nothing else, it should be with the knowledge that what you did, even though it might have taken a little bit more time than we would have wished from when the time that you made those gifts, but what you did, not only did it matter, it had the desired result. It worked. We have made extraordinary growth and change since that time. And we really want to make sure you both know that and come off this feeling really good, schlepping all the nachas that you deserve to for what it is that you did to help ghetto school to this point. And I'm going to just give you, and there's a couple of you may have heard some of these pieces before, and I apologize if it's a little bit repetitive, but I really want to make sure that this group in particular really understands what it is that we actually have done here over the last 3.5 years. I'll try to speak in broad strokes. I should say at anywhere along the way, as we've already seen, feel free and interrupt me, ask a question, put out a point of clarification. I don't want this to be, this is not a lecture. It's intended to be a conversation. I just do want to front load it with some information for you. When I arrived here 3.5 years ago, or really even in the times that I was interviewing before I arrived, it was really clear that there were 4 big things that needed to happen if the school was going to be able to make its transition out of crisis. And I just want to name what those are and tell you a little bit about how we've gone about addressing them. The first was just transparency. And transparency here, I mean up, down, left, and right. Teachers to administration, school to parents, school to donor, everyone to everyone. There just wasn't as much information flowing in each and every direction as we think it ought to be. Transparency for me is a core organizational value. And so one of the first things we did right away was lean into transparency, that we were going to share that which needed to be shared, whether it was something that was flattering or something that was challenging, that's how we build a healthy culture is by we name the things that need to be named, we lean into the things that we need to lean into, and we tell the truth. And so we've embraced a culture of transparency from day one, and it's a guiding ethos of the school all the way up until today and moving forward. We had 3 big questions that needed to be answered to help the school move forward. The first was around its Jewish mission and vision. There was a lot of confusion around what exactly the Ottawa Jewish Community School was as a Jewish school. As a community school, it means that we don't just fall back on any one denomination within Judaism to tell us this is what we ought to be doing. These are the things that should be our priorities. As a community school, all of these things are to be negotiated and to be sorted through and to work on. And it's hard work. And that's why oftentimes community schools struggle to articulate something clear, because you're worried that whatever circle you draw, you're potentially leaving somebody on the outside, and schools don't typically like to do that. The problem is that if you don't stand for anything in particular, then you don't stand for anything, right? And so we spent a lot of time in my first year or two really getting clear about what our Jewish mission and vision was going to be. From a process standpoint, we did 2 things. We started doing series of town hall meetings with parents in our school to better understand their needs, their concerns, their hopes and dreams. We also started a rabbinic advisory committee, which brings together every pulpit rabbi in Ottawa around the same table. Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, every single one of them meets with me 3 or 4 times a year. That in and of itself is probably a minor miracle. The first time we had all of them in our chapel space sitting around a table, I swear, I had a Jewish studies teacher walk by the chapel space, look in, see this collection of rabbis, and she actually had a tear because it's the first time that she had seen all of these different rabbis together in a room. So just for a sense of Klal Yisrael, it's a wonderful thing to bring everyone together. But more importantly, we had work to do. We had a lot of things we needed to figure out about how we were going to function as a community school that fully supports and embraces the full breadth and diversity of the Jewish community here in Ottawa. We don't see ourselves as a school that starts and stops where the Orthodox day school begins. We see ourselves as a Jewish day school that's here to serve the entire Jewish community, and we aim to do that to the best of our ability. We've done a lot of things, but one of the things that we did that I want to share with you is that we've clarified what our priorities are Jewishly in our school, and I think they're worth naming. And this is not in the order of importance, so I just want to say that out loud in case you hear something that you think should be ranked higher or lower. This is not intended to be a ranked order. Hebrew fluency. No child should be in Jewish day school for 9 years and come out not being able to have basic Hebrew fluency. Not acceptable, non-negotiable. Siddur and synagogue literacy. No child should come out of Jewish day school without knowing how to daven, without knowing how to walk into any Jewish synagogue of every flavor in any community and not know how to both participate and to lead. Kids cannot come out of a Jewish day school without having had an opportunity to wrestle with authentic Jewish text in their authentic forms. So holding an actual Tanakh, holding an actual piece of Mishnah, holding an actual piece of Talmud, and not just learning how to read it and translate it, but how to wrestle with it and make meaning. We're not a dogmatic school. We treasure questions over answers. We want all of our kids to come out as thinking really important questions about who they are as Jews, and part of how we do that is we wrestle with our texts. Israel. Our kids need to come out of school as strong, proud Zionists with an understanding of Israeli history, with understanding of current events, prepared to be engaged, and when they move into their high school and university campuses, prepared to advocate when they come face to face with all different kinds of disinformation, and they start to hear things about Israel that may challenge their belief systems. They need to be ready for that, and we have to prepare them for that. Jewish history with an emphasis on Holocaust studies. It's critical that our students, this obviously happens more in middle school, we want our kids to have a clear understanding of the Shoah and to be the next generation that ensures that never again is really never again. Kihila, a sense of community. Our kids live in concentric circles of community, starting with their school community, their Jewish community, their Ottawa community, their Ontario community, so forth and so on. And they need to learn how to function and be active members as citizens in each and every one of those communities. We live this through social justice programs, Tikkun Olam projects, and they start to have conversations about philanthropy before bar and bat mitzvah so that they can contribute as the generations before have contributed as well to the future of the Jewish community. Klal Yisrael, as I've mentioned before, you can't come out of OJCS without having an understanding of all the ways that one can choose to be Jewish, and more important than understanding, with mutual respect. That we understand and we respect that there are different choices that Jewish families make, and this is a school where all of those things are both learned about and honored and respected. To strengthen our program, we've increased both contact time and rigor with Jewish studies in our school. The initial results of all of this work when it comes to clarifying our Jewish mission vision, the first wave of our enrollment growth has come exclusively from religious and Orthodox families. If I look at the percentage of new students in our school, they were overwhelmingly coming, certainly in the first wave, they were coming from Orthodox families and families who I would define as being moderate to maximally religious. And I can talk more about that if that's interesting to anyone. The second big conversation, I won't go as long into each of them. The second big conversation was around French outcomes. If you were involved at the school during its moments of high crisis, you likely know that one of the narratives swirling around the school was that parents had all different kinds of concerns, some founded, some unfounded, that you couldn't come out of OJCS and transition easily into French immersion programs in grade 9 in high school. And so we created this dynamic where we would be losing lots and lots of kids every year after grade 3 because grade 4 in the public board is the middle entry point for French immersion. So we had this narrative that had built up over years, and we were seeing an annual exodus from grade 3 to grade 4. What did we do? Again, town halls, engagement, talk to our parents, what matters, what's important to you. We started collecting data, don't want to rely just on anecdotes. We would tell parents, everything's fine, of course they can transition and they do great. And there are plenty of kids who did, but we need more than anecdotes, we need data. So we've started surveying our alumni each year in grades 9 and 12 to see who's actually studying where and what, and how they self-report on how well prepared they felt they were for French. I get feedback every year from the departmental chairs, the French chairs at both SRB and Ashbury, where the overwhelming majority of our kids go into for high school. And we hear directly from the schools, how well do OJCS kids come into French immersion? What do we need to learn? How can we get better? Thanks to a very significant donation, we were able to hire the same organization that trains all of the French language schools in Ontario to work with our French teachers over a 2-year period of time. We're finishing a 2-year consultancy right now. That consultancy has been to provide our teachers with the same diagnostic tools they use in the French schools to analyze exactly where children are across all the dimensions of language acquisition. So there's no more wondering or guessing about where your child is or isn't with regard to French language. We can precisely and scientifically tell you where that child is. And with that knowledge, we can point them in the right direction moving forward. Our teachers have received a ton of professional development in this area. And the last deliverable we're going to get from this consultancy is curricular advice. Since we spend less time in French than the schools they typically work with, what do we really need to hone in on? What do we have to really prioritize to maximize our opportunity to prepare kids to be successful when they transition into French immersion in grade 9? Like Jewish studies, we got creative with our schedule, and we've added both contact time and rigor to French language instruction as well in our school. What has been the result so far? We're in our 3rd consecutive admission cycle, but there's been 0 attrition of students leaving OJCS from grades 3 to 4. And really, when I look at it, almost from any grade because of French. We don't have 100% retention, but wherever we have attrition issues, it's really no longer about French. Is it possible that families have self-selected out before they come here? Yes, of course, that's possible. There could be other variables, but that annual exodus with all the angst that comes along with it is essentially done. The next thing that we did, and probably the most important, is we re-examined our value proposition as a school. For 40, 50 years or so, the school, like a lot of Jewish schools, was able to get by just being the Jewish school in the community. We're the Jewish school, you're Jewish parents, you're going to send your kids to the Jewish school, and that's fine. And for years and years and years, that was fine. It was fine. We're living in a different time. Parents need to understand what the unique value proposition is of any school that they're going to choose to send their children to, especially one they have to pay for. So we have a responsibility to be really clear about what is unique about the way the Ottawa Jewish Community School thinks about teaching and learning, different from what you can find in the public board, different from what you could find from other secular private schools, and different from what you might be able to find at the other Jewish day school in our community. We have to clarify who we are. And here too, we benefited from a significant donation that came through a coordinated ask with Federation. And we hired a consultancy firm called Notosh, and they worked with us for about 18 months. And we interviewed students and teachers and parents and board members and donors and security guards and anyone and everyone in our orbit to get feedback. We interviewed parents who chose to leave the school early. We interviewed parents who chose never to come in the first place, all to better understand how parents view the value of what we offer here and how to craft a value proposition that we think speaks to what we're trying to achieve in our school. What you see on this slide is the result of that work, what we call our North Stars. These 6 North Stars, each one of which might not be completely unique to OJCS, but in combination is uniquely what this school believes to be true about teaching and learning. And I can do an entire presentation on each one of them, and I won't do that to you. I'll just name them and just make sure you understand what they are, and I'll move on. So when we talk about each person being responsible one to the other, that's a core Jewish value around community. We've talked about community. This idea that there's a floor but no ceiling is our commitment to personalized learning, that every child in our school is treated as an individual, If your child is in grade 3 and can read at a grade 6 level, then he or she is reading a grade 6 or 7 book. Right? If your child's already learned the alphabet before senior kindergarten, they're not going to spend all of kindergarten relearning the alphabet. They already know it. It's time to move on to the next thing. And whether that's language arts or math or science or social studies or Jewish studies or art or music or PE, it doesn't matter. Anywhere a child has a passion or a talent, we have a responsibility as a school to know that better than any school could possibly know it and to lovingly push that child to reach his or her maximum potential. We learn better together. We live in an interconnected world now. Very few of us go to work and close the door and are by ourselves to accomplish everything that we need to do. We actually learn better together. The learning itself is better when it's done in collaboration, but that's a taught skill. Not every child knows how to do that automatically. Not every adult knows how to do that automatically. So we've spent time here explicitly talking about that and learning it. We're on Jewish journeys. We're a community school, so we're not going to be in the business of judging where each Jewish family's Jewish journey should begin or end. However, that doesn't mean we don't have an agenda. We would think ourselves not doing our jobs well if Jewish families came to OJCS and were not as inspired to take their next family steps on their journey, however that journey is going to evolve. For some families, it's going to exist in familiar religious tropes, going to synagogue, learning new skills, sure, different kinds of ritual observances. For other families, it's going to be about Israel and Israel engagement. For other families, it's going to be about philanthropy and social justice. It doesn't matter to us. We want to be inspiring that growth. We want to be facilitating questions. And for those parents who do want us to partner with them, we want to be there to be their partner. So if you've never built a sukkah before and your kid comes home from school and says, hey, I'd love to build a sukkah for Sukkot this year, and that terrifies you because you have no idea how to do it, we want to come to your house and build that sukkah, right? We want to be your partner for the families who want that part of their Jewish journey, and we want to inspire the growth. When we talk about we own our own learning, when you think about schools and you think about who you would imagine owns the learning, you usually think about teachers, but it's really the students. We're in this for them. They should have some agency and some voice over their learning. And more importantly, the most important thing a school does is teach a child to learn how to learn. That's the most important thing we do. And so we have to spend time doing that with them, helping them understand their learning styles, helping them understand how they work best, their executive functioning skills, their organizational skills. We're preparing them for high school and university success, and they have to learn how to take responsibility for their own educations, and we spend meaningful time doing that. And this last one is ruach, which loosely translates to joy, but it's got a different slight connotation to it. Those of you who have Jewish camping backgrounds might recognize that word from that context where it's most usually used. It's this idea that this is all supposed to be fun, right? Not just for the kids, by the way. It should be fun for the teachers. I tell my board members all the time, it should be fun for them. I'm not sure they always feel that way about it, but it should be fun for our board members. It should be fun for our volunteers. This is supposed to be joyful. We're in the service of something holy and magical, and that should carry joy. And we go through our day and we look explicitly to build in joy into our school in both ways you might imagine, Jewish holidays and whatnot, but also other opportunities for joy, because that's what we want to be doing here in this school. When it comes to this value proposition, thanks to yet another donation, we were able to bring in, after the Notosh people, we were able to bring in a colleague of mine, Sylvia Tolosano, who sadly and tragically passed away last week at the way too early age of 53. She consulted in our school for about a year or so, and she focused her energy on the different kinds of platforms, pedagogies, and literacies that kids need in order to be successful in 2021 and beyond. And our teachers had opportunities to learn from and with her, and you sort of see some of the little examples of what that looks like in this slide. We have spent time, now that we are really clear about what we think teaching and learning should look like, we've been able to now go back and align all the rest of what we do to reach towards those North Stars. We have to re-examine everything we do. If we believe teaching and learning should look in a certain way, what does that mean for homework? What does that mean for behavior management? What does that mean for parent-teacher conferences? What does that mean for all different kinds of facets of our program? Every one of those needs to be re-examined to ensure that we are actually doing it now in the spirit of what we now believe to be true about teaching and learning. We did get a grant, and we had a family make a very nice donation that's allowed us to start re-examining our physical space. The spaces aren't as important as what happens within them, but it's nice to sometimes have spaces that can be as innovative as the program to facilitate kinds of experiences. So if you were in our school today, we would be sitting in our makerspace, which is a beautiful big space in our basement that has elements of a traditional science lab, but also has a virtual reality creation center, a green screen and video tutorial making section. It has a 3D printer, a laser cutter. It has tons of both high and low tech equipment so that our kids, either in classes or individually or with their teachers and all different combinations, can come, put hands on things and make. Making is a big part of the experience. We build prototypes. Our kids have genius hour projects where they do all sorts of things. We have a kid this year who's creating an app that will measure wait time at all of the dog parks in Ottawa. So if you want to take your dog on a walk and you want to know how busy any of those dog parks are, he's building an app that's going to give you that information. He's doing it here in our school as part of our regular STEM curriculum. That's the value of having a makerspace. A child has an idea, great. We're not just going to talk about it, we're going to build it. We're going to do it for real. And we've started working on our library as well, thanks to a parent donation, to sort of make sure that our library also is a library that makes sense for the 21st century and beyond. Just to give you a couple examples of things that have come out of all of this work that we've done. I mentioned virtual reality. Our kids each year now create virtual reality tours of different cities in Israel. So we can't go to Israel, but our kids can build those virtual reality tours and have some kinds of experiences. One of the best things we did last year is our kids worked with frontline health workers at Hillel Lodge to design PPE that made sense for those workers. So we printed in our makerspace face shields and ear savers for masks. We printed them in mass and we delivered them to Hillel Lodge where they're still using them. We take advantage of the technology and we connect our kids with kids and communities from all over the world. We call them Skypertunities, where our kids have an opportunity to sort of learn about different communities and engage with kids. And it's great for language development as well. In French, they can be connecting with kids in France and other French-speaking places. For Jewish studies, they can be connecting with Israel and other Jewish day schools and practice their Hebrew. We now have a functioning blogosphere. Every class in our school has a public-facing blog where any parent or member of the community can see what grade 2 is up to. What's their homework? What projects are they working on? What videos have they released? What's going on in the classroom? And every child in our school in grade 3 and above now has their own individual blogfolio where the child themselves is reflecting and sharing about what they're doing here in our school, which is an extraordinary gift for a parent and that child to have over time. And I can, for anyone who finds that interesting, I can certainly share what that looks like with you. It's really amazing. And I'll give you just a little bit of a Jewish example that's not quite as, it's inspiring, but it's not in that, it's not quite as joyous. I had a parent reach out to me last week who sadly had lost his mother in recent weeks. And he wanted me to know that he was so touched that his child was able to sit with him and walk the parent through, not only to walk through the stages of grief that they had learned in school, but also the Jewish mourning practices that he had been learning, so that as a family, they can talk through how are they going to navigate this difficult time in their family's life. Right? What a powerful thing to do. I've heard stories from Hillel Lodge. Our kids, it's a blessing being on this campus. We have a lot of partnerships and relationships. Hillel Lodge is one of them. Our kids go and spend time with residents at Hillel Lodge. And I've heard from families that sometimes, sadly, when a grandparent may be nearing the end of life, and it's time for grandchildren to come and visit, that you can see a marked difference in how the OJCS kids are able to have a sense of comfort and calm. They know how to behave in those circumstances differently than their relatives who may not have had the opportunity to spend time with people in those kinds of facilities. Like, these are the reasons we exist as a Jewish day school. All of the exciting science and secular education, of course, is part of it. But we're a Jewish day school first and foremost. And those opportunities to create moments of Jewish meaning is really what makes things special. So what's been the result of all of this? This is the information that I shared with you in the email. There's nothing new here, and this is just an initial list of sort of things that we have been doing over the last few years. But all of this work, the consultancies, the town halls, the thinking, the trying, the planning, the failing, the learning, all of that has resulted in this list of accomplishments that we are very proud of. And obviously we hope are just the beginning of what's going to be coming from years to come. I want to draw your attention to the last bullet point, which I separated out for a reason. One of the reasons why our school was so able to successfully transition last spring to distance learning, and this year to what we call high flex learning, is because of all of this work that we had been doing up until now. Our teachers already knew the pedagogies and the platforms needed to function in a digital space. So when we had to close it down a year ago, it took us less than 4 days to make a full transition and to relaunch as a fully functioning all day, every subject, virtual Jewish day school, which we iterated many times over the spring because you learn as you go. And when we launched school this year, we have an extraordinary high flex program, which means that we have kids, unlike a hybrid program where some kids are learning at home and some kids are learning at school, but they're doing it differently from each other. In our school, it's high flex. Any of our families who've chosen for their children to learn at home this year, those kids are fully integrated into their class experience. They see them each and every day. They participate live in class experiences, even as young as kindergarten. What it also means is that every time a child has to be kept home for a day or a week or 2 weeks out of an abundance of caution for a potential exposure, those kids seamlessly transition into the other piece of the learning. We've had kids, my own kid one day was sent home at 10 o'clock in the morning for a runny nose. And by 10:30, she was logged back in with her classmates, moving on with her life. Completely seamless. And it's because of all of this work that we've been able to put into the school over the last few years. If you were to ask me what's next, programmatically, we've spent about 3 years on the hows and whys of learning. And the next thing we need to do to complete this first phase of restoring excellence is an examination of the what. As a private school, we get to determine what our kids learn, what are the desired outcomes. We want to aim way above and beyond the public board. We get to make those decisions for ourselves, and that's the next part of the work. If we weren't in COVID times, we already would have started it. We'll start it now when it feels comfortable and safe and affordable to do it. But that's the next phase of this process, is to do a full re-examination of what exactly do we want the outcomes for each of our kids in every grades, and to make sure that everything aligns the way it needs to. When we also talk about what happened as a result, what happened is enrollment. Now, I'm a big believer in two things: not overpromising and not making enrollment the only metric that measures whether or not a school is being successful, because there are a lot of variables that are outside of our control, and there are other ways you can measure a school's success. But of course, we all want the school to grow and to thrive, and that's part of it. You may know that a year or two ago, we were able to successfully solicit a major gift from the Danby and Greenberg families. And as part of that solicitation, we were asked to do 10-year projections. But 10-year projections are hard to do even before COVID. They're even harder now. But it's still a really helpful exercise for us to be thinking this far ahead of ourselves. So part of that request was about enrollment. And you can see we're in the 3rd year now of that 10-year. We have real data now to go alongside the projected data, and we're tracking as we go. We did a high, medium, and low set of projections. This is the medium one. The high one is highly aspirational. The low one is worst case scenario. And this is the one that we think is the more realistic one for us to be aiming for. And we are well on track to hitting those metrics. We've hit them each and every year so far. My first look at enrollment for next year, which has already started to come in, I think we are on pace to hit, if not go over, what we have projected for next year as well. Where the first wave of growth came from religious and Orthodox families, the second wave of growth is coming from public school families who, if I'm being honest, mostly due to their COVID experiences, have reconsidered OJCS and have found their way back to us because of what we were able to do for students during this time. However, when I look at enrollment for next year, we were worried that those families, once they imagined things were going back to normal, would go back to not having to pay for school. So we wanted to make sure that we did a lot of time this year helping them understand the value proposition of the school in the hopes that they would be inspired to stay with us. And so far that's borne fruit in next year's enrollment. We're almost getting to the end. We tend to think in narratives in our school. And so we believe that part of the story that we're telling is that thanks in large part to you, that we have finally as a school made the transition from emergency to what we've been calling fragile stability. It's stable, but it's fragile. What we're trying to do now in the years ahead is to carefully and hopefully chart a path towards sustainability. And before I move into the hard numbers, I thought it was helpful just to separate this one data point out, because it's really important to remember that one of the biggest variables when we look at our financial picture is how extraordinarily generous our school is and our community through the school in being able to provide as much assistance as we can so that finances shouldn't be the barrier for a Jewish child to receive a Jewish day school education in Ottawa. So you can see that manifests itself in two different ways. We artificially keep our price point low. It's about 60% of what you would see in the private school marketplace in our community. So it's low on purpose because we want it to feel, not just feel affordable, we want it to be as affordable as it can be. And that creates a gap for us each and every year because even the full pay families aren't really paying for the cost. And we give out a lot of financial aid. Now, some of those numbers are tied to enrollment, right? So the more students, the more financial aid, makes sense. But it's a very significant amount. It dwarfs what we get from Federation by way of allocation almost by double. So it's not, if every dollar we received from Federation went only exclusively to scholarships, we would still be needing to raise a significant amount of money just on the financial aid part of things. So we just think it's helpful to highlight that variable. It's part of our financial story. Now we're going to take a peek at the numbers. So I just want to say something about this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. Again, as I said at the beginning, I want to name that I understand in the past with this group that there may have been some challenges around transparency about what the school's true financial picture had been and is, along potentially with some confusion about the other metrics. We want to use this opportunity to be really clear with you about what is true and where the challenges on our path to sustainability lie. And to walk us through that, I'm going to turn it over now to Stacy, who, as I said, is our development professional.
Okay, so thanks, John. This is my second year with the school, just so you have a little bit of background. And before me, there wasn't really a dedicated professional. So the numbers that we have, you'll see are exciting to see where we have been able to go so far with our limited time of having someone in this role. So again, these are the 10-year projections that were put together about 3 years ago for the Danby Greenberg series of meetings. It's sectioned out into 3 main categories: the annual campaign, which is what we ourselves raise and house. There is the foundation endowment, which is everything that the Ottawa Foundation spins off. So, you know, we might get an $11 check from John Smith's bar mitzvah fund from, 1976, all of those sorts of things. And then there's a Federation allocation, which John mentioned before. So you have 10 years of projections along with 2 years of actual. There are no actuals for this current year that we are in because it is still obviously in flux and moving. You'll see, particularly for the foundation endowment, we estimate that a little bit more conservatively than the returns have been for the past 2 years, mostly because of the volatility of the market. We don't want to over assume something that will come through and then it won't. So we keep that nice and conservative. You'll see that in that annual campaign, there is a bit of a dip from 2022-23 to the following year, 2023-24. The Danby Greenberg gift ends then. So we have this wonderful gift from them. The last year of that is slated for the year 2022-2023. So that is taking a chunk out of our annual campaign into that, the following projection. You'll also see, if you look down, that the Federation allocation is slated or has been projected to decrease beginning 2022, 2023 again. If you remember some community chatter that John will speak more to later, but there was a planned endowment for Jewish education in Ottawa as a whole that has been put on hold for COVID-19. However, when we did these 10-year projections, those numbers were in our projections. So you'll see at the bottom line, the community education endowment funds, we were projecting that we would get 300,000 beginning in 21, 22 to 500,000 starting in 22, 23 moving forward. Those funds are not currently available to us, and that is why they are separated out at the bottom. And the plan was for the Federation allocation dollars to also decrease a bit as those other endowment funds were to increase. I am currently unaware of the Federation's plans for our allocations moving forward, as we know that those planned for endowment funds do not currently exist. We can go to the next. Does anyone have a question on that?
Before I go to the next, I want to give you two other pieces of context. I think looking at this slide, just so you have it aware. We didn't want to share with you our entire projected budget in each and every one of these years, but it's important for you to know that these are the numbers that, if met, allow us to have break even or better budgets in each of the years. So we're obviously paying attention to anything that we know that might lead us to believe that any one of these columns may come in less than we had originally intended for, which is why we're going to come back in a bit to talk about that bottom line, now that it is exceedingly likely that those numbers are not going to start to find their way into our budget as soon as the next year. You're also going to see, if you're looking at the Federation allocation line, I don't want you to, there's two things one thing conflated in there that I just want to make sure I name, because it may look like it's dropping off in a really significant way. Part of that is we are benefiting from the emergency campaign that Federation ran this year to help organizations navigate COVID-specific challenges. So it will have gone up, and then it's going to go back to settle closer to its normal allocation. That's not that doesn't mean something wrong happened. It was intended to go up for that purpose, and then it's hopefully going to then recede as our COVID needs lessen a little bit.
So here is a bit of an overview on our annual campaign. Now, every revenue stream is not listed here. I just am highlighting some of the main ones that I think really show how wonderfully our school is going and our trajectory. So you'll see 2018, 2019, again, that was the year before I started. We had a total of 2 alumni gifts for a total of $45. This year, we have brought in just over 15,000. And this is what happens when you are actually making the asks and you're doing a little bit of the work. So you can see in every category, we have gone up not only in numbers, but in the number of donors who are participating. So you'll see that second line, that parent line. One exciting note on that is that at the moment, this is 47.8% of our parent population. So, and this recognizes households for divorce. So it's 67 of 140 individual households. Or looking at it another way, it's 55.9%. We can call it 56% of our child unit. So 66 out of 118 sets of siblings. Which I find really exciting. You'll see our grandparent numbers. Our grandparent campaign has not yet officially kicked off. That happens in just a couple of months for our Generations Day. It's been rebranded. You also see our community giving, and there is the corporate giving at the bottom. So this year we launched a Friends of OJCS corporate giving program, which is different from Maccabia, which some of your businesses have been involved in. That is a single event sponsorship. This is full school sponsorship with a logo on our school webpage and assorted other benefits. And so we have $45,000 in commitments from 26 businesses so far. We also have secured 27 life and legacy commitments. I'm assuming that most of you have at least heard of the Life and Legacy program that the Community Foundation is spearheading. It means that we are securing gifts later. They're life giving, and at the moment, it's an estimated $750,000 of an endowment for us later. We are doing many things. Again, I'm just going to speed up a bit to keep track of the time. We are working on more outreach. We are working on more points of contact, both for general community members and grandparents. Richard actually is joining us in our wine tasting series that is going on right now. We have coffee and conversations with some grandparents several times during the year. We've had an alumni Zoom reunion. We are increasing our social media presence and a variety of other things. So, yes.
Okay. So I would have liked to have been here 5 minutes ago. That's because I talked too long, and I apologize for that. Now that you have, and I know that was a lot of information that came at you really quickly, and I apologize for that as well. We're going to send you around every slide that you've seen. We're going to send you afterwards as a leave behind in case you want to dig into any of that. And if there were questions that we didn't get a chance to get to or don't get a chance to get to, or you want to know more about something, it would only be our pleasure to be able to spend a little bit more time with you. Here's where we really want to land with you. If you look at our school as a case study and you think about, my apologies. If you think about our school as a case study and that we're in this journey from fragile stability that should be to sustainability and beyond, this school or the community, for whatever your motivations were for contributing to this campaign, when you cared so much to help when we were in crisis, this is where we really could benefit from your wisdom. We're not going to read each question and have you go around and answer each one of them. But what I really would like before we finish this is I'd like to look at these questions, and any one of these questions that speaks to you, we would love to hear from you. If you were consulting our board, you have 2 board members here. What advice might you give us as we're charting this journey forward? What are your ideal impacts of OJCS on the community? Why is it important for our community to have our school, and what kind of impact would you like to see it have? When you think about our recent successes, was there anything that resonated with you? Is there anything that you think would resonate with the broader community that you so ably represent? Do you have hopes and aspirations for us in our next chapter? And just to say out loud, we know that many of you are aware of this pending Community Jewish Education Endowment Fund because it was into the planning stages before COVID. For all we know, you may have had some contact already around that. It would be really helpful for us to know, what do you think you would be looking to hear or to know, if and when an ask comes for that? What would inspire you to want to be part of that? So I don't want to put anybody on the spot, and I don't want to tell you which question to answer. But if you can share anything with us about any of those questions that speak to you, we would love to hear from you. Or we could just look at each other,
Feel free to unmute and jump in.
Yeah. John, first of all, thank you for this. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff here that you've thrown at us, and we all see the time. So obviously, the ability for us to have a conversation is really not there. I'm just wondering, like you say, we could either look at what you send with including these questions and each individually respond back to you, or interested in having a follow-up meeting where we actually do have a conversation as a group. Maybe that's a better way of handling it. So I just throw that out for everybody.
Totally fair. We got so excited about ourselves that our time management skills got a little bit sacrificed unintentionally. So yes, I don't want to rush something that could potentially be a really rich conversation. I'm also super sensitive to how challenging it's been getting everyone together. So all of those are fine for me. We'd be thrilled to meet, to follow up with any one of you individually. We'd be thrilled to be able to bring you together for a part 2 that sort of starts right here where we left off. Whatever anyone wants is what we want.
I mean, I'd like to suggest that we do have a follow-up meeting, because there is so much here. You asked us to think about things at the beginning, and you ended off with these excellent questions, which I'm sure we all want to think about and talk about as a group. That's what I think we are as a community. We're a close community, and we like to talk to each other. We generally like each other and like to talk, amongst each other. So I would encourage a follow-up meeting. I don't know what other people think, but that's my thought.
I agree.
Okay. I will let the rest of you, I hate putting people on the spot, so I don't want to make anyone respond to something they're not ready to respond to, but we are certainly prepared to invite you each with the hope that you'll be able to participate in a part 2. We'll use this last slide as the first and only piece of business for that conversation. We will send you each a copy of these slides when we get off this call, so you can dig a little deeper into the information should you wish. If you have specific questions or concerns, if you look at it and you want to just email myself or Stacy with a clarifying question, or if you want to lean into something that you heard a little more, it would only be our pleasure. What I really would like to do, since we have 3 minutes left and it only will take 2 minutes, is I'd like to just show you a little thank you, if I can. Now I'm going to let me know when I hit play if you can hear the sound. And sadly, it's going to be my voice first with what my normal hair is supposed to look like. You ensure that there is a floor but no ceiling for each child at OJCS. Thank you. Merci.
I can't hear.
Yeah, the sound isn't.
So it is as loud on my screen as I can possibly make it. I have no other way to make it louder. So I'm going to do the best.
The volume in the video itself.
I can try. See.
Learning to be a leader. I create.
Sorry, everybody. I got to run. Thank you.
John, I have a hard stop now. I'm on another conference call at 10. I have to leave.
So what I'm going to do is, conveniently, this is available on YouTube. So when I send you the slides, I will send you a separate link to the video, and you will hopefully, it's 2 minutes long. Hopefully you'll watch it. Hopefully it'll give you additional nachas. And just before you all drop off, I just want to end with where we began, which was just to say thank you. Like, just thank you for all that you have done for our school and for our community, and all that you continue to do. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
And right back at you.
And thank you for it was really thorough and helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks
Take
all.
care,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.